So let's assume that you've been given an expression like this. You've got x to the 1/3 to the 6th times y to the 4th to the 4th root, and you want to know how to solve it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out how to simplify all of these expressions down to their kind of lowest value, their easiest value to look at. We have to probably break this apart in two pieces. So we're going to break this apart into the x over 1/3, well, x to the 1/3 to the 6th, and then this y to the 4th to the 4th root. Okay, so let's start with the x to the 1/3, and if you remember from x to the 1/3 to the 6th, if you remember from your normal kind of exponent, your first exponent lesson ever, you remember that if you have exponents like this, so you have x squared, and you have, I don't know, times x squared, right? You know that you would multiply those two right together, and that's the same thing as just adding the exponents. So, well, that's the same thing as x to the 2nd plus 2, which would equal x to the 4th, right? So x squared times x squared just gives you x to the 4th. And if you have something like this, so you have x squared, or maybe let's do third. Let's do third, right? That's the same thing as taking x with 2 times 3, right? And so you'd have x to the 6th, right? Because that's the same thing as x squared times x squared times x squared, right? And so you add those up just like we did in problem 1, and you would get x to the 6th, okay? So in this case, we've got x to the 1/3, and that is being raised to the 6th power. We have to take this x and multiply the 1/3 times 6. Well, what do we get when we multiply 1/3 times 6? Well, we have x to the 6/3, right? If you multiply 6 times 1/3, right, that's almost the same thing as multiplying 6 over 1 times 1 over 3. And when you do that, you just multiply across, right? You 1 times 6, and then put that over 3 times 1. So we end up with x to the 6/3. Now we can reduce that fraction, right? We can reduce that fraction. We know that 6 and 3 both share a common factor of 3. So we can divide the top number by 3, and we can also divide the bottom number by 3. And so we're left with 6 divided by 3, which is 2 over 1. And we can simplify that even further because 2 over 1 is just 2, right? So x to the 1/3 power to the 6th power is the same thing as x squared, okay? So that's the first part. Now what about that y to the 4th to the 4th root, right? We have that y to the 4th to the 4th root. Well, if you remember from your roots here, we're trying to essentially figure out what fits into y 4 times, right? We're trying to figure out what fits into y to the 4th 4 times. Well, if you remember, right, something that can fit into y, right, to the 4th, y to the 4th, that's the same thing as just y times y times y times y. And well, so, that is already 4 pieces, right? We've already got 4 pieces there. Y fits into y to the 4th 4 times, okay? So we're actually kind of just taking those 4s and we're canceling them out. So we're left with just y, okay? Now you can also think about this if you look back at how we got this, right? This is kind of the same thing as having a rational exponent as a fraction. Okay, and so you can actually take that y and you can rewrite this as y to the fourth over 4, right? And if you simplify that 4 over 4 like we did here, you actually just get y to the 1, right? Y to the 1 over 1, which is the same thing as y to the 1, or to the first, which is the same thing as just y. So you can see that these two are the same thing. So when we put these together, right, we start with x squared. We get x squared, and then we're going to multiply that by y, and that is your simplified expression.